Are you ready?
Vietnam was one of the most controversial wars in American history. Eddie Adams, a photographer for the Associated Press, traveled to Saigon, South Vietnam in 1968, 2 days after the Tet Offensive. The Tet Offensive was a series of coordinated attacks on all of South Vietnam's major cities, all at once by the Viet Cong of North Vietnam and the People's Army of South Vietnam. As he was photographing the turmoil, he came across a prisoner named Nguyen Van Lim, I'm guessing. He's being led by the head of police, Brigadier General Nguyen Loan. Loan was the captain, or Lim, the prisoner, was the captain of a rebel terrorist squad that had killed one of the general's friends. While bound and being led by the street in his handcuffs, the general casually walked up, put a gun to his head, and then put a bullet through his head in the middle of the street and left him there. This photo is significant because it became a symbol of the brutality of Vietnam. It was used by the anti-war movement. This photo forced the world to look at Vietnam and to question the tactics behind the war and what was going on over there. We've used concepts from the book to analyze this image, the Saigon execution of 1968. Jeremy will discuss, first, the significance of the rhetoric. Joanne will discuss refugees and borders. And lastly, Raven will discuss connotation of media images as well as citizen journalism. With that, I'll pass it on to Jeremy.
Born June 12, 1933, Eddie Adams was an American photographer and photojournalist, noted for portraits of celebrities and politicians, and for coverage of 13 wars. He is best known for his photograph of the execution of Viet Cong soldier, for which he won a Pulitzer Prize in 1969. Adams remains one of the most published photographers in the U.S. His work has been published in numerous newspapers worldwide and magazines such as Time, Vogue, and Vanity Fair. Adams received more than 500 awards, including 22 World Press Photo Awards and the 1968 World Press Photo of the Year Award. Now let's discuss the Saigon execution, taken on February 1st, 1968. As you can see in this photo, General Nguyen Loan, holding the 38 caliber pistol. As you can look at the picture, you can see that when you first glance, what do you think about? You think about someone getting held at gunpoint, but why? Has he done anything wrong? Do you know if he's done anything wrong? Do you know if he's messed up his family, his life? Actually, he did mess up his family. So, Lim actually killed one of Long's friends of the family. So, as you can see, he shot him. Why? He said this. Long's quote was, "If you hesitate, and if you didn't do your duty, then men won't follow you." So if he was hesitated and not shot this man, then the men would look at him in a different way and say, hey, maybe you didn't get your job done. Why should we listen to you? And now I'm going to end my section with this quote from Eddie Adams. "Still photographs are the most powerful weapon in the world." Now I will pass it on to Jamal, and we'll talk about the refugees and borders.
Okay. One common narrative about digital media and network society is that we now live in a world which distance has been bridged by communication technologies, saying that the images that we have across worlds such as Vietnam and USA we've been seeing because of newspapers and because of social media. That said, this was taken in 1968. The reason that much Americans were able to see it was because it was put into a newspaper and a magazine. Because television wasn't as big in '68, we got closer to other countries through paper. If billions of people flee war, violence, persecution, natural disasters, making them have to leave their homes as they are forced to feel safe. And they're called refugees. During just this war alone, Vietnam produced 1.6 million refugees. And Teddy Cruz mentions in the book that we should not look at people as have-nots, but rather learn from their strategies of being forced to live in the area they are in. Because who knows that one day, maybe we could become refugees. Sad to say, but we all remember Katrina, and the people from New Orleans were called refugees in their own state. And with the help of this image, we can see how foreground technology, visuality, and environmental change. The problem is not the structure they're in, but the equality of wealth. If you have not, then people look down on you. But if you have, they treat you very different. On the record.
I will be discussing image, power, and politics and citizen journalism. In Chapter 1 of Starkin and Cartwright's Practices of Looking, Image, Power, and Politics, it says, an image can denote certain apparent truths, providing documentary evidence of objective circumstances. So in this photo, the denotative meaning of the image refers to its literal or explicit meaning. And it is a military officer shooting someone in plain clothes. So that's what you see when you first look at it. That's all you know. You don't know the history of it. So that's what you see. That's the denotative meaning. Connotative meanings are informed by the cultural and historical context of the image and its viewers' lived, felt knowledge of those circumstances. So when we look at it from that perspective, the photo symbolized brutality and violence that came as a result of the war. And this photo only furthered that disapproval of the war. Because when you see this, you see a military officer shooting someone who, appears to be innocent. When we talked about the rudder, you learn that this man also had his own, grievances and crimes that he had committed. But still, when you see that there is unnecessary violence going on. The two concepts, denotation and connotation, can be useful because they help us to think about the ways images function, both narrowly and expansively. Photos do not simply have one meaning, and by understanding those different viewpoints, especially in this photo by Eddie Adams, we can better understand the image and its purpose. And next I'll be talking about media in everyday life. Well, it's the chapter that I'm bringing citizen journalism. So in Chapter 6 of Starkin and Cartwright's Practices of Looking, Media in Everyday Life, we discuss the concept of citizen journalism. The book asks, can the media serve social justice political movements? Communication technologies may be used as empowering tools that promote and open flow of information and exchange of ideas. Like Jamon had been mentioning, we didn't really understand what was going on because back in that time in the 60s and 70s, we didn't have as much social media or technology presence as we do today. So we learned a lot about this from newspapers and stuff like that. And there are different narratives that can be had when you put a story in the news versus when a citizen journalist like Eddie Adams reflexively took this photo and put it out there for the media to come up with their own conclusion about. And they did. This view affirms the potential for media forms to be used by individuals and groups to resist dominant structures or offer cultural perspectives. And a big countercultural perspective about the Vietnam was to not have the Vietnam War. There is a large anti-war movement associated with this. And this photo just, it progressed that even further. Eddie Adams said that this photo is reflexive or unplanned, but once the photo was released to the world, the countercultural anti-war movement ran with it. The photo was used as a way to further disapprove of the continued war in Vietnam, like I mentioned. Citizens determine what to photograph and post, and how to best express political agency through image and text without the direct filter of the media industry. So, because Eddie Adams took this photo, even though he was working for the Associated Press at the time, he took this photo and put it out into the public, and the public decided what sort of narrative they would have. And as Eddie Adams said, still photographs are the most powerful weapon in the world. And I'll give it to Isaiah for the conclusion.
So to answer the question of why does this image matter, Vietnam, like we said earlier, was controversial. The rebels were basically fighting to get people out of their country and to retain independence, something they hadn't had for hundreds of years. This image kind of legitimized why they were fighting and also made the world pay more attention to what we were doing. And it was instrumental in reform and changing the world. Thank you all.